Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're a new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello readers, and welcome to episode 59 of Fully Booked. I'm your host Natalie, and today's episode is going to be in honor of Valentine's Day, my book recommendations for popular romance trope. So we have quite a long list to go through, so I'm not going to waste too much time. But before we get into the whole list and recommendations that I have, I just want to put a disclaimer that I decided not to include forced proximity and there's only one bed or one room in this list of recommendations because I just feel like those tropes come up so often in every romance book. They're not necessarily a major part of the plot in a romance book, and I just couldn't think of any really good books that were specifically those, but they come up a lot within books, so I will try to mention any subtropes and whatnot as I go through this list. Also, for my longtime listeners and viewers, you probably noticed that I used to do a Dob segment in each episode, and I kind of just stopped doing that. I just felt like it was taking up too much time the episode, so I kind of just stopped doing it altogether for a while. But I kind of want to try and bring back a little segment before we start each episode, because I just feel like it's a really fun way to start each episode. So I'm going to try and bring it back, and for now, we're going to try to go through my current reads and kind of give you guys some live reading updates. So to start off, I have pretty much two current reads right now. I am currently rereading Beach Read. Yes, I have officially started my Emily Henry reread for 2026, and this is the first book, which is exciting because this is one of the first books I read by her. So I've been having fun. I've been going through and annotating this a bit. I'm about 150 pages in so far, and one note I actually have to make is that I didn't remember this book being as rom-com-y the first time around that I read it, and I seem to have the wrong memories from my first read around, where I remember some of the sadder things that happen in this book, but not the first half to two-thirds of this book, where it's actually a little bit more rom-com-y in the things that we get to see our main characters doing. So I'm curious to see what I think of the rest of the book now. And then my other current read is First Time Caller by B.K. Borson, which just feels so appropriate to get ready for Valentine's Day because this cover is just so cute. Our MMC is also named Aiden Valentine. I'm already almost halfway into that book as well, and I have to say, for the most part, it's really living up to the 90s rom-com feel that everyone has been mentioning, so I feel like it's living up to the hype for me so far, although I will say I am at a bit of an odd part in the plot where I feel like things are picking up romantically between our MCs, but the timing feels a little bit off to me for some reason, and I can't exactly explain why, so I can't wait to update you guys what I think about the rest of the book when I finish it. But like I said, we have a long list of recommendations and books to get through, so let's just start getting into it. So we're starting off this list with my personal favorite romance tropes, one of which is Friends to Lovers. And the books I'm recommending for Friends to Lovers are going to be The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams and People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, which I am going to be rereading this one very soon, especially since the movie's out. But yeah, these two are fun, and The Cheat Sheet also has a bit of fake dating in it. I mainly chose these two books because they really give me that pure Friends to Lovers vibe and feeling, because I don't know if you guys have noticed that there's actually been an uptick of Friends to Lovers romances. I feel like Enemies to Lovers romances were extremely popular in the book space back in 2021, but I feel like Enemies to Lovers has mainly moved over to the romantasy space now, and I actually feel like I've been seeing a lot more Friends to Lovers coming out in the pure romance space, but I just don't get the same feeling with the newer books coming out, because I find that a lot of them have the premise of the two main characters just suddenly becoming friends. We see them become friends for like a month or two before they end up falling in love, and I really love that Friends to Lovers feeling and progression where you get to see them actually being friends. Like, for example, in The Cheat Sheet, our characters Bree and Nathan, like, they've been friends since high school, and they're supposed to be in their late 20s to 30s in that book, I think. So we know that they've been friends for a long time, that they know each other. They get each other, and then the same thing with People Meeting on Vacation. Alex and Poppy have just been friends for years, taking vacations together for years, and they just have that solid relationship. But I think there's a certain yearning and tenderness in the Friends to Lovers trope that I just really enjoy. Again, really got those feelings when I read these two books, so that's why I'm recommending them. And then the next trope I'm going to talk about, I confess, is kind of still my god tier trope. I've read so many books with this trope, and that is childhood friends and lovers, which makes sense because this is on a pretty similar vein to Friends and Lovers. And we have a lot of recommendations for this trope because, again, I've read so many childhood friends to lovers romances, and starting with the obvious ones, Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren and Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I don't even know if I need to explain these books that much because you're big readers, romance reader like I am, and then you've probably already read these too. Again, I just really love the pure and tenderheartedness of a childhood friends to lovers, which I definitely got those feelings from those two books. And then if you, in particular, I would say if you really loved Every Summer After, then I'm also going to recommend Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan. Oh, and I guess another note I was going to make before is that in terms of other tropes, every childhood friends to lovers is pretty much a second chance romance. It's kind of one of those things where, like, I feel like all childhood friends to lovers are also second chance romances, but not every second chance romance is a childhood friends to lovers, if you know what I mean. I feel like we had kind of a similar setup and feeling where we have a lakeside or beach town that our FMC and her family would go back to and visit, and her next door neighbor in the summer beach town is the one that she falls in love with. One thing I will say about these first three books I've recommended, though, is that I kind of wish there would be more childhood friends to lovers where both characters aren't taken. I just kind of wish we could see them just kind of naturally come back into each other's lives and fall for each other. I feel like they always just put the other love interest in there as like an initial obstacle for why they can't get back together. That's probably why I like the last book that I'm going to recommend to you guys, which was Rewind It Back by Liz Tomford. I feel like I honestly just enjoyed this book so much, not only because it was the last book in the Windy City series, it's Rio's story, but because it was a childhood friends to lovers, which makes so much sense. I feel like so many last books in Interconnected Standalone are childhood friends to lovers, but it honestly hits pretty well. I think, and again, I like this one because they just kind of naturally happen to be back in each other's lives. We also get, what I think kind of forced proximity, I guess, because they're like next door neighbors in this book. She moves into the house across the street from him without knowing, and then ends up working as his interior, I forget if she's an interior designer or what her job was in that book, but something like that. Yeah, honestly, just so many good, pure feelings from reading all these childhood friends to lovers. In terms of encapsulating the trope the best, I would honestly recommend any of these. The next trope, which is another top favorite of mine, second chance romance, which I've also briefly mentioned. I feel like what makes a good second chance romance to me is knowing deep down to your core that these two characters should be together. I just feel like you really have to be rooting for them to be back together, because second chance romances can be a little bit tricky, where I know a lot of people don't like this trope because if the relationship didn't work out the first time around, then why should they get back together now? And yeah, you really just have to be rooting for them, because if you're not rooting for the romance, then that's just not a good second chance romance, or even a good romance in general. So the ones that where I felt I was really rooting for the main characters in their romance are Happy Place by Emily Henry, as well as 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. And the reason I enjoyed Happy Place a lot for the second chance romance is because it was the first book that I read where we actually explored the trope in detail. We got to see the good parts of the relationship, but also the bad, why they broke up. Like, I really feel like we went on the whole journey and then came back full circle to why they should get back together. I've read a couple other second chance romance books, again, like 7 Days in June, that did portray this trope pretty well. But for me, Happy Place was the first book that I read where I really saw us go more in depth and fully flesh out the trope and the characters. And then I really felt like I was rooting for them by the time we were reaching near the end of the book and for them to get back together. Obviously, I just love this book overall too. It's one of her more literary books, and some of the quotes in this book hit so hard and were so good. Also on the themes of friendship and how friendships change. And then for 7 Days in June, I don't remember if that one's also a childhood friends to lovers. All I remember is that they meet when they're teenagers and then they meet again as adults, as successful authors. I just remember that Shade and Eva felt so right together. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even really remember the plot of 7 Days in June at this point, but I just remember rooting for the two of them to be together so much. I just couldn't see them not being together. And by the time I got to the end, I was honestly so happy the way it just all resolved and it all worked out for the two of them. Yeah, 7 Days in June, I will also say it wasn't your typical romance book. It didn't really have the typical, I feel like, romance, like plot structure and setups and things like that. But the romance itself and the way she wrote it was just really good in that book. That book is also a little bit of a steamy book, I have to say, remembering some of the scenes that happen in it. But yeah, for the second chance romance, honestly, so good. And then continuing down the list, we have Enemies to Lovers, which I probably technically have some recommendations that are a little bit better, but I kind of just put this one on the list just because, and if you guys have read this one, then you'll understand why, and that is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I do feel like we have the typical Enemies to Lovers setup where at the beginning of this book, Liz really does not like her next door neighbor, Wes. She's kind of always disliked him, and he's just supposed to be her wingman while she's trying to win her crush over. But as the story goes on, and then when we get to the end and we actually find out what's actually been going on behind the scenes, how Wes has actually felt about her this whole time, I just love the overall progression of this so much. And there's even a part where Wes says, enemies to lovers is our trope. So that's actually the reason why I put this one on here. Also, the whole she's not you vibe going on this book also just made it amazing for me. I feel like I don't talk about it too much, but He Fell First trope is definitely another one that is one of my favorites. But yeah, if you're looking for a good YA enemies to lovers, this is what I'm going to recommend. And then similarly on the list, we have Rivals to Lovers, which I'm going to be recommending Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams, and Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon, which that was a whole mouthful to get out. I feel like Rivals to Lovers, though, is a bit weird in the pure romance book space, where it pretty much toes the line of Enemies to Lovers, where they often do hate each other for a bit of a juvenile reason, but I think the main difference is that there's a little bit more of an obstacle or something standing in the way between the two main characters, or usually they're like competing for something, where in Beg, Borrow, or Steal, they're both elementary school teachers, so they're in the same type of role, but then they have to work together because she accidentally emails her book manuscript to her boss, and obviously, of course, she doesn't want her boss finding out about her second job. And then in the case of Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, we have the whole typical high school academic rival setup where they're both always competing at the top of the class, so they're just always up against each other, and hence they don't really like each other. I feel like if you really liked the show Never Have I Ever and you were rooting for Davy and Ben to be together in that show, then you'll also like this book because it has that very similar kind of style of vibes in their relationship. I think what makes it really great, Rivals to Lovers, and why these two books were really good is just the tension, but also the compatibility of our main characters, where I feel like they have to be very equally matched, especially in terms of, like, I guess, mental capacity. Like, usually the two main characters have to have very similar level and style of wit, humor, and banter. Yeah, just being well matched always makes for the best Rivals to Lovers, which I definitely felt with these two books. And the next trope is a really fun one. It's the You've Got Mail trope, where it's basically a similar setup to the movie You've Got Mail, where she's an independent bookseller, he's a big franchise owner, which in the movie, I think it's called Fox Books, and he's, kind of trying to buy her out. She won't give up. So they don't like each other in real life, but then they're secretly emailing back and forth, not knowing who the other person is until near the end of the movie. I don't know why I like this movie and this trope so much. I think it's just like the reveal, and I don't know why. There's something about the progression and the way this trope is done. I think the tenderness that comes on when they realize who the other person actually is, that just, I don't know how to explain it. There's just something very magical about it. And for this one, I have two recommendations. The first one's a YA summer romance, which was Alex Approximately by Jen Bennett. I read this one a couple years ago, so I honestly don't really remember much of the plot, except that it had the You've Got Mail trope, and when she finally realized who Alex actually was in this book. I don't even remember the main characters' names at this point. It did have the same feeling as the movie You've Got Mail, but if you want a true You've Got Mail in book form, I would definitely recommend To Sir with Love by Lauren Lane. I actually just read this one a couple months ago because I read it in late 2025, and I just remember I got magical feelings when I read this book, because not only is it the You've Got Mail trope, it's literally a You've Got Mail retelling, where in this book she was a wine and champagne boutique owner, the business is failing, and then the MMC Sebastian offers to buy her out since her business is failing, but she refuses to, give up without a fight. So obviously, they don't really like each other in real life, but then unknowingly they're going back and forth on this dating app where you can't see each other's faces. And then the reveal at the end when she sees him was just so cute and magical, likewise to You've Got Mail. And this one also felt really 90s rom-com in terms of the way she described the characters and their dialogue. And the fact that this was one of the few adult no-spice romances that I've read where literally nothing happens except for they kiss. Likewise to 90s rom-coms like You've Got Mail, and that just felt so special to me as well. Also, I apologize if I'm starting to go through the books quickly, but this is taking me a lot longer to film than I thought, so we gotta move a bit faster. So for Grumpy Sunshine, there's a ton of these romances out there. The best one that I personally read is When in Rome by Sarah Adams. I just feel like Noah is so Grump personified, and he continues to be a Grump even as a background character in the rest of these interconnected standalones. We continue to see him be that way, so that's why I'm recommending this one. Also, this is the book that really taught me what a stern brunch daddy is, which if you guys don't know what that is, it's basically a combination of someone who has a dominant personality, but also has a cinnamon roll, tender-hearted side to them. Then the next one I'm going to talk about is Fake Dating. I only have one recommendation for this because I think it just pairs so well, and we all know what this book is, so I'm not really going to go into that much, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Also has a he fell first trope, which is why I enjoyed this book so much when I did read it. I have to say, I'm curious if anybody ever read this book as a fanfic, because I do know that Ali Hazelwood used to publish fanfic, and this was a Raylo fanfic before it was published as The Love Hypothesis. So if anybody's read it and you have thoughts, please let me know. I would love to know. And then similarly, moving along to Marriage of Convenience or Fake Marriage Trope. And the only book that I felt was worth mentioning for this one is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren, where they have to pretend that he's married in order for him to receive his inheritance, I believe. It also has forced proximity, one bed, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember much except that I did like the chemistry between our two main characters in this one. But otherwise, I don't really have much to say because I'm not the biggest Christina Lauren fan. Their books are usually a little bit more spicy than I prefer to read. Plus, the things that some of their characters say, and in particular, the FMC in this one would say things that would make my jaw drop open, like, did she really just say that out loud in front of other people? I feel like that's just always the kind of reaction that I have with their books and that I had with this one. And to clarify, for the next few tropes I'm going to go through, it's mainly going to be as seen from the FMC's point of view, and you guys will understand what I mean when I start going through. So the first one I'm going to go through is Brother's Best Friend, which I'm going to recommend In Your Dreams by Sarah Adams. This is also one of the more recent Brother's Best Friend romances that I read, and I absolutely loved it, which is crazy because it feels like it's been a while since I read it, but I haven't even had the chance to break down all my thoughts for you guys because I haven't done my January wrap-up yet. So you guys will get to hear more about this. But for now, I will say I really did enjoy the Brother's Best Friend trope in this one. And I think in particular because this is another one where it's the last in an interconnected standalone. And we've seen them as background characters in the rest of the interconnected standalones. And it's very clear, even from the get-go, that Madison always sees James as Noah's best friend, like her older brother's best friend, but James clearly has not always seen Madison as Noah's little sister, and he's clearly started to develop feelings and had yearning for her, and then we just get to see that all come into play and fruition in this one, so I really enjoyed that a lot. And if you guys enjoy this trope, then you will too. And then similarly, we have Best Friend's Brother, which the first one I'm going to recommend is This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. I know there were some mixed feelings on this book, but I personally loved it. Obviously, it has the best summer vibes. We're set on a summer house in PEI in this one. And we also have, I don't know whether to call it a repeated one-night stand or a friends with benefits situation where they meet for the first time, not knowing who the other is. And then when our FMC realizes that he's her best friend's brother, she kind of backs off and they decide that they're better off as friends. But of course, they keep meeting over the course of a few summers and trying to resist each other, but failing. Yeah, this one's really, really great and definitely made me want to visit PEI at some point in time. And then the second one I'm going to recommend for this is Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan, where I feel like we have a very similar feeling and vein to In Your Dreams by Sarah Adams, where our FMC, Allie, always just sees the MMC as, again, her best friend's little brother, but he's kind of always had a crush on her, and then It's so much so that she doesn't even recognize him when she meets him again as an adult. I think she also doesn't remember his real name in this book. She only remembers the nickname he goes by, so she doesn't even remember that he's her best friend's little brother until they run into each other at like this gathering. But besides the best friend's brother trope, I loved the romance in this one. It was very sweet, and the way that our MMC even made space for her, especially because in this one she's grieving and kind of starting over with her life. I just really like the way he treated her in this romance and their relationship overall, which is so good. And then for Sister's Best Friend, I'm going to recommend The Right Move by Liz Tomford. And this is one of the exceptions on this section of the list where I was thinking about it from Ryan, our MMC's point of view, because he basically falls for his twin sister Stevie's best friend, Indy, who also happens to be her coworker. And Indy moves in with Ryan after breaking up with her longtime either boyfriend or fiance. So we have forced proximity, roommate situation in this one. They also fake date for part of this book. And definitely, if you want an MMC who is the king of acts of service, that is definitely Ryan Shea. I don't know why in particular, I always remember in this book how our FMC Indy likes to drink iced coffee all year round. And then Ryan goes to the trouble of making her an iced coffee every morning, where he doesn't just put ice in the drink and then call it a day. He literally brews it fresh and then puts it in the fridge. And I don't know why that part just always got me in that particular little act. It's just those little acts that really make the romance even in a book, and it made the romance for me, that's for sure. For a rarer trope, we have X's Best Friend, which I'm going to recommend Roadside Attractions by Mara Quinn. This is one that I was kind enough to receive the e-arc from the author, who is also Canadian, and this also featured a cross-Canada road trip, which was a bit of a fun premise and different. But yeah, I feel like this is not a trope I see as much. We also had enemies to lovers and forced proximity in this one, where we basically see our FMC Stella, who has just been dumped by her ex Roman, and he unfortunately still owes her rent money. So she basically ends up going on, again, a cross-country road trip with his best friend Wyatt to hunt him down and get her money back. And I feel like I loved all the antics and the different mishaps that we see Stella and Wyatt get into as they're on this road trip. I will say that I feel like the plot got a little bit lost this book, and then it got resolved very quickly near the end of the book. Overall, the journey was very fun, and of course, we also have some He Fell First in this book, which is part of the reason why I enjoyed it so much. And also, if you're looking to read it, this one is also on Kindle Unlimited, if you're interested. For a classic, we have Brothers Love Triangle, and specifically, I put Brothers Love Triangle because I couldn't really think of any books where there's a guy who's in love with two sisters. And for this one, this is going to be an obvious one if you guys were keeping up with it at all last summer when the last season came out, and that is the Summer I Turned Pretty series, which is a YA trilogy. And I'm going to be honest, for this one, I'm really just recommending it for the sake of the Brothers Love Triangle trope. I would not really recommend these books overall, because looking back on them, if you read them when you were of that age group, so when I read these books the first time around, I think they were really fun to read. But if you're trying to read them as an adult, or for me, reread them rather, where I did reread this trilogy back in 2024, there's just not much of note here. They're just honestly a very quick summer read. And I would say that the show for this one is so much better. Actually, overall, I would say the adaptations for Jenny Han's books are a bit better than the books overall, just for the certain, I feel like, vibes and feelings. So definitely for sure, this is one I would recommend that you watch the show rather than just reading the books. Especially because the ending for the last book in this series was a little bit underwhelming for a trilogy. Okay, guys, we're getting to the fun ones on this list. So we have Unexpected Pregnancy Trope, which I think the only real one I've read for this trope is Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. Also another recent read that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed this one because, like I said before, the pregnancy trope is usually just something that's thrown in as like a bit of plot filler when I've previously read it in other romance books, and it just didn't really make sense to me. But this is one I read where it's literally centered around the pregnancy, and if the pregnancy hadn't happened in this book, like, our two main characters would never have gotten together. But I feel like I liked the situation in this book and them being forced together, trying to learn how they're going to co-parent, but also becoming friends along the way. So this one's also a bit of a friends to lovers romance in it. And I just really love the progression in this one overall. And Win and Bo just made a lot of sense together. I thought they had really good chemistry, and I was just remember smiling by the end of this book seeing them get together and having their happy ending. Even though I don't like the pregnancy trope in many other romance books, I did in this one. And then for an age gap romance where we have older woman, younger man, because that's the only one I've read personally, I did put Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember a lot about the plot of this book, except that, again, it's an age gap romance where I think in this one, our MMC Daniel is 28 and our FMC Alexis is 38. So again, significant age gap. I feel like I just really remember liking the romance and the dynamic between our two main characters, and especially the way our MMC treats our FMC. There's obviously, I feel like, a certain dynamic within an older woman, younger man relationship, and I just really liked the two of them together in this one. I feel like it kind of made me want to read more age gap romances because, again, I feel like that's another trope that's been seeing an uptick in the romance book space. And again, if it's done in exactly the right way, I feel like it actually can be enjoyable. This next trope is a saucy one and potentially my least favorite on this list, and that is friends with benefits. I don't think I need to explain what that is. And the only book that I've read that truly had this trope for me is People Watching by Hannah Bonham Young. And it's funny because as I was just talking about Out on a Limb, you guys can tell I really enjoy Hannah Bonham Young as a romance author overall, but I did not enjoy this book because of the trope. And I feel like the trope honestly got in the way of our characters having a real relationship because I feel like we saw so much potential, so much good chemistry even as the story went on. But then because we were focused on this situation and the things that our FMC wanted to try with our MMC, I just feel like it's stood in the way of them starting something real romantically, which was frustrating for me as a reader. So yeah, hence why I didn't really enjoy this one, but that's maybe a bit personal to me. If for some reason you were looking for a friends with benefits romance, then this book would be it. Now, this next one is not maybe a trope necessarily, more of a type of romance, but I did want to go through some of my favorite ghost paranormal romance books that I've read, which were The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, as well as Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, I feel like plot is not the strong suit either of these authors' books typically, so a bit of a warning if you're a plot-driven romance reader. But if you really love romance books for the characters, the romance progression, and also just cozy settings and vibes, then definitely either of these books will do it. And in particular, I really loved The Dead Romantics since our MMC is a ghost and the two characters can't really be physical, they can't even technically touch each other. We really get to see them build the emotional connection first and really build out the foundation. Good Spirits was a little bit weird in that case where we did see them build a bit of a connection, but they were also able to get physical somehow even though he was a ghost. So if someone could explain that to me, I would really appreciate that. Anyways, either way, again, if you really looking for some sort of paranormal romance, but with some cozy setting and feelings, then either of these two will do it. And the next set of tropes I'm going to talk about are all kind of occupation-based, which I think is kind of cool because we get to explore different realities through these different occupations, which is an added element in a romance, for me at least. So starting with a celebrity times normal person romance is what I wrote, where basically one of our main characters is famous. And for this one, I chose the Happy Ever After playlist and Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. We have slightly different setups where the Happy Ever After playlist, she ends up dating a world famous musician, and then Nora Goes Off Script, she ends up dating the famous actor who is starring in the movie that she has just written the screenplay for. I really just like these two books and the way they depict that trope because we get to explore a lot of relationship dynamics and things like privacy issues, trying to live a normal life while also dating someone who's always in the public eye. It definitely created struggle and tension between our main characters in these two books, but it was also so satisfying to get to see them work through all these things and be together at the end of the book. And then next for a musician's romance, or in the case of the recommendation I'm giving, only one of them is a musician. I did pick Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston, and I feel like this one is just such a strong contender because not only is so much of this book about music overall, but our main characters connect so much over music because he's a musician and she's a songwriter. And if you don't know, the magical realism premise of this Ashley Pawson book is basically that she can hear his singing voice in her head. And then when the two of them actually meet up in person, they figure out what song that she's been hearing, and then they have to write it together, and they go through that whole thing. So this book just screams so much of music overall. So if you're a music lover and you're looking for a romance based around music, then this is definitely it. Now, this next one, I feel like I kind of made up. This one's not actually a popular trope, but I feel like it's just one that I've seen in a couple of these recommendations that I'm going to give you guys, and I enjoyed so much, and that is a book lover's romance where basically both of our main characters are in some sort of publishing industry related role, which as a pure book lover, who does not enjoy that? So the obvious first recommendation I have for this one is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which is cool because in this one, I remember she is a literary agent and he is a book editor. We also have some subplot where I vaguely remember she's not happy in her current role and wants to move to becoming a book editor instead, like Charlie. So that was also a cool part of this book. And then my next recommendation is going to be, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, Beach Read by Emily Henry, where in this one, they're both authors. I forgot to mention, I guess for both of these Emily Henry book recs, we do have rivals or enemies to lovers as well, which is again cool, added to the tension and everything of the romance relationships. And then the last one I have, which is another one where they're also both writers, is The Roughest Draft by, hold on, I forget these authors' names. Emily Wibberley and Oster Siegmund Broca, which, fun fact, this is a married couple who is a writing duo, which I think also made this story really interesting. This one also feels really meta because obviously this author duo has written other romance books, but this one in particular where it's also about two authors that are trying to co-author a romance book just made it cool, interesting overall. I kind of wonder how much the authors were able to pull from their own lives and experiences as well with this one. So yeah, any of these I would recommend. And then for the last trope of this little section, we have bodyguard romance, which surprisingly, I actually haven't read The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, which I feel like would be the obvious choice for this trope. So the only recommendation I actually have is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams, which is actually the second book in the When in Rome Interconnected standalone. And in this one, we follow our MMC Will, who is actually the bodyguard of our FMC Annie's sister-in-law, Amelia. So he's technically not her bodyguard, but since he's a bodyguard, I kind of just counted it as a bodyguard romance. We also have opposites attract in this one, which I thought was really sweet, and I actually do enjoy this trope when it's done right. I think I just really like this one because everybody's kind of against Will throughout most of this book as being a good match for Annie because, again, he's a bodyguard, so he looks like he's a tough guy, a bad boy. He just doesn't seem like the right fit for sweet little Annie, but yet he's still always so kind and gentle towards her and a bit of a cinnamon roll man, honestly, at heart. And so that's why I really enjoy this romance. Honestly, if you want just any super cute and sweet romances, Sarah Adams is just definitely the go-to. Now, I mentioned this next one in some of the previous recommendations as a subtrope, but if you want a true He Fell First romance, then I'm going to recommend Play Along by Liz Tomford, because the way Isaiah has always been crushing on and relentlessly pursues Kennedy in this one, but then also in the previous books in the Windy City series. If you guys have read this one, then you just know how great of a male love interest Isaiah Rhodes is. And I just enjoyed him and Kennedy in this book so much. And then for the final trope I have on this list, this one is super specific. So again, I really only have one recommendation for this one, and this is If He Wanted To, He Would. And if you guys know, if you've already read this book, then you're going to know I'm recommending Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I think this is another one where our MMC was pretty good at acts of service and really caring for our FMC. And I'm going to read one quote in particular because this just encapsulates the whole trope, where Justin says, "You're not asking too much. You're just asking the wrong person. Ask me instead." Honestly, I don't know how much more we can ask for from a male love interest, real or fictional. And with that, that is all the book recommendations I have for all of these popular romance tropes. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. That was such a long list, but hopefully you guys were able to get some good book recommendations. And also, I'd love to hear from you guys. What book you would recommend for any of the tropes on this list, whether it's the main trope or sub-tropes or whatnot. I'd love to hear. And as always, rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. Subscribe on YouTube if you're not already for some fun upcoming videos and episodes that are going to be coming out this month. Just a note, Early Access Fridays are still happening on Buy Me a Coffee if you would like to go and support the podcast over there. All those links are always in the show notes or the video description for you guys. And as always, I hope you're all having a wonderful day wherever you are, and I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.